Hello, and welcome to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Services Rochester Area Podcast. My name is Jan Heineman, and today I'm going to be reading to you from the Rochester Beacon. Our first story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer and editor Paul Erickson and is dated July 2nd. America at 2:50. There's a picture here of the stone plate engravings of the Declaration of Independence from the General Records of the Department of State. It begins in Congress, July 4th, 1776, period. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. And then goes on to the Declaration of Independence. This 4th of July, the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, has a special meaning for our nation. But what the semi-quincentennial means to individual Americans reflects the diversity of the country itself. A survey of Rochester Beacon readers conducted this week underscores that point. Respondents expressed a wide range of thoughts and emotions, from pride and belief in the country's core values to sadness and fear for its future. We should be proud of the American experiment and continue to believe in it and support, defend, and protect it with all our collective hearts. That's from Ed Columbus. Joanne Beck echoed him, writing that, quote, "We are still perfecting both the ideas and practice of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Sandy Mayer views the semi-quincentennial differently. He believes that this anniversary underlines that we are no longer united. We are as polarized as I've ever seen during my lifetime, half of the country vilifying the other. And Lynn Braband wrote, "I usually fly the flag on July 4th. This year I did on Juneteenth, but not sure I will do on the 4th. July 4th, 1776 is the date when the Second Continental Congress, representing the 13 American colonies, adopted the Declaration of Independence, formally separating from Great Britain. The beliefs stated in the Declaration include the idea that all people are created equal and that they have fundamental rights, such as liberty, free speech, freedom of religion, due process of law, and freedom of assembly. As the Library of Congress exhibit titled Creating the United States notes, many Americans agreed with those ideas, but for some they were far more acceptable in the abstract than in practice. The tension between the country's founding ideals and the reality experienced by many of its people has existed for 2.5 centuries. The new republic displaced Native Americans from their ancestral lands, did not outlaw slavery until after the Civil War, and did not extend the vote to African American men or to women until 1870 and 1920, respectively. When the country's independence was declared, the city of Rochester did not exist. This region was home to the Seneca Nation, and it remained so until they lost claim to most of their land in the Treaty of Big Tree in 1797, signed near present-day Geneseo. Rochester and the surrounding region have significant links to the Declaration of Independence, however. In 1848, the first American Women's Rights Convention, held in Seneca Falls, adopted a Declaration of Sentiments that demanded an end to unequal treatment of women. This document, modeled on the Declaration of Independence, helped fuel the push that led to the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. In 1852, at an Independence Day event held at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, Frederick Douglass gave a keynote address in which he asked, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" It became one of the most famous anti-slavery speeches in the nation's history. "Fellow citizens," Douglass said, "I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too, great enough to give frame to a great age. But," Douglass continued, "Independence Day celebration revealed the immeasurable distance between us. This 4th July is yours, not mine," he concluded. "You may rejoice. I must mourn." Yet, for all its flaws and often slow progress toward a more perfect union, the United States today is the world's oldest continuous democracy, and the Declaration of Independence has inspired movements for freedom, self-determination, and human rights globally. Survey respondent Mark Giannini wrote, "America has made mistakes, sometimes serious ones, but America has also shown a remarkable ability to correct itself, expand opportunity, and move closer to its founding ideals." The survey's first question asked readers whether America has lived up to the principles stated in the Declaration of Independence. More than two-thirds, 68%, said very much, 14%, or somewhat, 54%. In a May Gallup poll that asked a similar question, 69% of respondents replied either a great deal or a fair amount when asked whether the United States had succeeded over the last 250 years in, quote, achieving the ideals for which this country was founded. Asked about where the country has seen the most progress since its founding, economic opportunity and democratic government were at the top. Immigration and citizenship and racial equality have seen the least progress, readers said, although majorities responded a lot or some for both. Looking ahead, a narrow majority, 54%, believes the country's best days lie in the future. In this respect, Beacon readers appear to be more optimistic than Americans nationwide. In a Pew Research Center survey conducted in January, only 40% answered ahead of us when asked this question. 44% of respondents to an Ipsos poll conducted in March and April gave the same answer. When asked, are the country's best days in the future or the past, only Democratic survey respondents, by a small margin, believe that the country's best days are behind us. Readers who took part in the Beacon survey were asked about their political affiliation. As in previous Beacon surveys, Democrats accounted for nearly two-thirds, 63%. Among the rest, 11% said they're Republicans, 4% belong to other parties, and 22% are unaffiliated. By comparison, the breakdown in the June 2026 Monroe County Board of Elections enrollment report was Democrat 41%, Republican 25%, other parties 2%, and unaffiliated 32%. The survey results diverged, in some cases widely, by party affiliation. For instance, while 56% of Republicans think the country has very much lived up to the principles of the Declaration of Independence, only 4% of Democrats chose that answer. Republicans also were much more likely than Democrats to say the country has made progress on democratic government, economic opportunity, and social issues like racial equality. Nearly 150 readers took part in the Beacons survey conducted June 29th to 30th. The survey took place before the U.S. Supreme Court announced two major decisions in Trump versus Barbara, rejecting President Donald Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship, and in another case in which the court majority struck down limits on how much political parties can spend in coordination with candidates. The following are all signed written comments of survey participants. Many additional unsigned responses were submitted. As a matter of policy, the Beacon does not post unsigned comments. Here's just a few. In answer to the question, in your view, what ideas or achievements exemplify the best of America? Maria Evans responded, diversity. The fact that New York City has one of the densest concentration of languages spoken at home in the world. So many different people from different cultures, all identifying as New Yorkers and living together, is one of the most moving examples of what America can be at its best. Kara Wagner-Scherer responded, the resilience of Native Americans to retain their culture and language, Black Americans claiming and living their value and power, immigrants, migrants, and refugees making a place and contributing to American democracy and emerging culture. Ed Palumbos answered, generous caring for the poor and underdeveloped nations is a vital part of our nation. Freedom of expression is a native right, and while it is under attack right now, it is an ideal that we continue to embrace. Michael DeMott responded, the ability of so many people over the decades to immigrate to the U.S. and work their way upward economically, educationally, and socially without government interference, and with the same rights as everyone as those born here. Unless we are Native Americans, we are all descended from immigrants and share in this achievement. Larry Browser responds, women's suffrage, ending slavery, and then Jim Crow, university research and education system, freedom for individual creativity and thinking, but we still have a long way to go. Tim Farnham responded, election of Barack Obama, establishment of the Peace Corps, establishment of Medicare and Social Security. Dan Drarmichich responds, number 1, Gettysburg Address. Number 2, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Number 3, 19th Amendment. 4, Brown-Scutis decision. 5, 1965 Voting Rights Act. Number 6, Obama's election. Number 7, Zinn's book, People's History of the U.S. Number 8, the 1619 Project. Number 9, Frederick Douglass's Independence Day speech. Number 10, Biden's defeat of Trump. Mary Lynn Vickers responds, the Voting Rights Act of 1964 and all ADA legislation and local support for ADA. Daniel Holland responded, the legal end of slavery. Rick Ekel responded, I believe the writers of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were inspired to think beyond the then known forms of government and to create a system of government that relied on the people, everyday citizens, to participate through their vote and the selection of government representatives. Citizen participation at all levels of government is at its best when individuals remain aware of and respond to the actions of their representatives. Jeanette Keene Taylor responds, there has been no specific set time in the country's history that has met the high bar set by the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. We have wobbled around, as in the 50s, when we provided a good balance of taxing the rich and making sure working class folks are secure financially. But unfortunately, it was also a time of dreadful racism. Equality must be created. It will not arise naturally, as long as people in the country put their personal greed and racial and other personal prejudices first. Community and acceptance of difference are the keys to attaining the American ideal. We have a long way to go. The next question on the survey was, please share any other thoughts on the 250th anniversary of America's founding. And readers responded, first from Ed Palumbos, we should be proud of the American experiment and continue to believe in it and support, defend, and protect it with all our collective hearts. Michael DeMott responded, it is unfortunate that we arrive at this juncture in our history at the same moment when the highest court in our land is backtracking on important civil rights, such as voting and the rights of minorities, while inflating the power of the country's executive branch far beyond that which was framed in the Constitution. I have a sense of being cheated from enjoying the fruits of freedoms that so many fought and died for over the centuries. Larry Browser responds, unfortunately, what should be a positive, forward-thinking time for our country is being destroyed by a little man and his cadre of sycophants. I hope that November starts the reversal of our backsliding for both our country and our place in the world. Stephen Giroux responds, we have always been a fractious society, fraught with conflict between the opposing forces of enlightenment and the status quo. It's what makes us yearn to a return for what was, or what could be. Ginny Meyer responds, I am sad that the months since Donald Trump's second election have seen such a backsliding on our ideals of freedom, justice, and inclusivity. I don't think President Trump is the only cause of this backsliding. I think it's a tendency that has been building up for some time, and that maybe, more importantly, has not been pushed back hard enough on. I'm hopeful that the founding ideals will prove stronger than the regressive forces we're experiencing now. But that is hope, tempered with the understanding that it will take many of us, using our freedom of speech and assembly, to win back the advances we have lost. Mary Lynn Vickers responds, I hope and pray that America's leaders and citizens will show compassion and understanding to each other as we move into the next decade. The coming 10 years will be critical. Martha Bush responds, I remember the excitement around the 200th anniversary. Despite Watergate, despite Nixon, despite race-based protests, we were all excited and proud. Today, with the despicable, corrupt, racist administration in office, many of us are plain embarrassed about where America is today. Celebration seems hypocritical. Pat Gooch responds, it's hard to feel celebratory at a time when a portion of the nation and our elected leaders want to take us backwards. We've lost forward momentum as a country. Instead, we're looking to the past for answers to problems of our day, many self-created. John Kalia responds, it's noteworthy that our 250th takes place at the same time as North America hosting the World Cup. Europeans visiting here are awestruck at all the advantages of American lifestyles. Americans should take note. Every nation has its challenges, including the U.S., but no other nation can provide the luxuries we take for granted. Peter Knapp responds, "We were and are an imperfect nation striving for a wonderful ideal. We have lost momentum towards that ideal at points in history, but we have always returned to it. I am less hopefully at this juncture, but still hopeful." Remy Fenster responds, "The 250th anniversary has the Founding Fathers turning in their graves. Many of the rights given to the people have been trampled on by this administration and the Supreme Court." Austin Albanese responds, "Anniversaries are an opportunity not only to celebrate but to remember. I've learned that many of America's most meaningful stories were never considered important enough to make it into textbooks. They survive instead in local newspapers, cemeteries, family papers, and small community archives. As we mark 250 years, I hope we take time to recover those overlooked histories alongside the familiar ones. They remind us that the American story has always been larger, more diverse, and more interconnected than we often imagine." And finally, from Vincenzo Mercurio Vincitore, "The Constitution is a moldy old document written by wealthy, classist, slave-holding misogynists who never imagined free people of color, women as anything more than property, gay people, transsexuals, disabled people, religious fanatics working their way into government positions, uneducated voters, corporations as political entities, multi-billionaires, dark money funding political empires, immigrants, organized crime, communications through any means other than paper," and the list goes on. Our current system, firmly based on this stick-in-the-mud document, makes it damn difficult to amend the Constitution, and the ruling class is deeply entrenched in exploiting its flaws. At the same time, our militarized local law enforcement only knows how to violate human rights and knows literally nothing of the laws which are supposed to enforce. Our lawmakers are entrenched in keeping their seats and kowtowing to big money rather than protecting the Constitution and doing the people's will. It's time for a revolution." That's from Beacon reader Vincenzo Mercurio Vincitore. And this survey of Beacon readers was conducted at the end of June, and I've read a selection of responses from readers. The survey was conducted by Rochester Beacon executive editor Paul Erickson. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Kayla Golage and is dated July 8th. "Holy Childhood Combats Illiteracy with Adaptive Learning." One of Kia Holland's students has a developmental disability, which means he is just now connecting letters to sounds. However, Holland, a middle school teacher at the educational nonprofit Holy Childhood, has seen a marked improvement after using the Reading Horizons structured literacy program. In January, her student knew only 16 of the 26 letter sounds. Holland says, "Yesterday he knew 23 out of 26, and he was verbally reading the letters. It brought a tear to my eye. There's so much growth I've had with this student for 3 years." In its mission to help pave the way for learners with special needs, the Henrietta-based Holy Childhood, a non-denominational agency founded in 1946 by the Sisters of St. Joseph, combats illiteracy through unique programs, such as those provided by Reading Horizons. The school serves 120 students across 40 districts with intellectual and developmental disabilities whose public schools cannot meet the students' needs. Holy Childhood attempts to bridge the gap in support while addressing the broader question of students' ability to learn to read and how they can learn best through alternative educational methods. Over the last 3 years, the agency has used programs developed by Reading Horizons, a Utah-based company that provides educators with foundational reading instruction. Its adaptive literacy program focuses on students mirroring the shape of their mouths and the form of sound. Additionally, they use microphones, music to teach rhythm and pattern recognition, and other methods to encourage student learning. Students' progress is tracked through Reading Horizons 3 times annually. In the past, Holy Childhood literacy programs lacked structure and consistency, and students often relied on computer programs with reduced teacher-led instruction and human connection, officials say. At the high school level, teacher Joe Aldridge, whose classroom has fully incorporated the program, encourages active student participation. Active movement is very important, he says. Gets them moving and focused on the material, spotlights them, and it's important for everyone to feel encouraged and proud of their work. Holy Childhood studied 35 students who used adaptive learning from September 25 to January 26. The results were positive across both middle school and high school classrooms. High school students improved by 27.3% in consonant recognition and by 47% in short vowel proficiency. Among middle school students, the results were 17.1% improvement in consonant sound recognition and a 35.3% increase in short vowels. The research is clear, says Laurel Axtell, education specialist, trainer, and presenter at Reading Horizon. Structured literacy develops the neural pathways that allow students to make progress, even when people historically assumed they couldn't. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Kayla Gulage, who's a journalism and English major at the Rochester Institute of Technology and a member of the Oasis Project's 3rd cohort. That's the Beacon's internship program. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Beacon is dated July 7th and comes from writer Gary Craig. DA's office sharing info with Greece investigation. The Monroe County District Attorney's Office is cooperating with lawyer investigators contracted by the town of Greece to investigate the actions of the now suspended police chief, Mike Wood. What the DA's office can share has not been publicly acknowledged. However, there was an extensive investigation into the crimes of former Deputy Supervisor Michelle Marini, who pleaded guilty to grand larceny in 2025. DA office officials acknowledged the cooperation last week, but declined to discuss the extent of what has been shared. There could be limits to what the office can provide. For one, there is the question of what is public and what is not, and what could be sought via public access requests. Also, some of the original allegations against Marini, including allegations that she was involved in the automobile tracking of 2 individuals, were not part of her plea. Questions surrounding the tracking could be one that attorneys, former federal prosecutor Richard Resnick and local private attorney Lori Fahey, scrutinize in the investigation. Publicly, there have not been answers about who initially okayed the tracking of a town police officer and a resident who'd been critical of the town government. But Wood was apparently in the chain that approved the tracking. In their agreements with the town, both attorneys note that the information provided to Greece could become subject to freedom of information laws, or could be shared publicly if there's litigation. Writer Gary Craig says, I obtained the contracts for Resnick and Vahey via state freedom of information laws. Here's an excerpt describing in part what's expected. The purpose of this engagement is to perform a fair, impartial, and thorough fact-finding investigation regarding whether Chief Wood complied with applicable laws, town policies, police department policies and procedures, ethical obligations, supervisory responsibilities, and duties of his position. The investigation may include review of documents and electronic records, interviews of current and former town employees, police department personnel, and other witnesses, review of relevant complaints, correspondence, reports, litigation materials, and other information, assessment of the credibility and reliability of evidence obtained, and preparation of a written report setting forth factual findings, conclusions, and potential recommendations. The firm's role is limited to conducting an independent investigation and rendering factual findings and recommendations. The firm, the law firm, does not represent any individual employee, witness, complainant, subject of the investigation, elected official, or appointed official in connection with this matter, and is not being retained to advocate for any particular outcome. Gary Craig goes on, the contracts show that the attorneys are being paid $365 an hour and lesser amounts for work by associates or paralegals, rates that are in line with work by private attorneys in the Rochester area. The current time frame for the investigation is several months, according to town officials. Vahey and Resnick declined to comment. Town officials said that the investigation is being conducted independently. Lawsuits being settled. Greece resident Ryan Murphy was one of those whose family car was tracked by private investigators hired by the town. He and his family recently settled a lawsuit against the town. The terms have yet to be made public. Murphy has been a critic of the previous administration in Greece. Records show that town officials claimed Murphy was harassing them, a claim denied by Murphy and his lawyers. Also suing the town is the family of former Greece police officer Matthew Bachman. He was fired from the department after police officials determined he was continuing to do jobs outside his police work while collecting workers' compensation benefits for an on-the-job injury. His wife, Tina Bachman, has alleged in the lawsuit against Greece that the Bachmans were targeted because she provided information that led to Marini's arrest. Marini admitted that she had town-contracted workers to do odd jobs at her home and the homes of her children. The Bachman lawsuit also appears to be approaching settlement. The suspension of Chief Wood and the resignation of Greece Deputy Police Chief Nasser Zanelovic came hours after a Substack I published in late May about a New York State police investigation into criminal allegations involving Zenelovich. The DA's office decided not to prosecute. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from contributing writer Gary Craig, who's a retired Democrat and Chronicle reporter who now writes on Substack. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Beacon comes from writer Jacob Schermerhorn and is dated July 7th. Early Learning Corps prepares for full launch in Rochester. Even after 30 years with the Rochester City School District, Karen Garew's passion for helping early learners did not disappear. After retiring, she continued to help with state testing days and intervention programs for grades 1 to 6. When a longtime collaborator and principal brought up another opportunity through the Early Learning Corps, a youth tutoring program that operates in 5 states around the country, it seemed to fit perfectly with Garew's reading teacher background. I decided to try it, and I've been very happy with it, she says. What I've always found the most exciting about teaching is when that child who you've been teaching, when they've worked at it and they struggled, one day they do it, and they're correct all by themselves. Garew adds this, illustrating an experience since beginning the tutoring position. Their face lights up, they have the biggest grin, and that spurs them on to work harder and do more because they were successful. After rolling out a pilot here in January, Early Learning Corps officially launched in March at Ibero-American Action League and the Rochester Early Childhood Education Center, serving 179 students ages 3 to 5 years old. Katrina Gobbins, Executive Director of New York Programs, says the goal for the 2026 to 27 school year is to expand to 800 students, which will require 45 tutors. While the exact placements are still being determined for next year, the organization will be part of its previous sites, as well as the second Rochester Early Childhood Education Center location planned by RCSD. Early Learning Corps tutors joining for the 26 to 27 school year will begin practice on September 8th with a 2-week intensive program, although training is continuous throughout the year. Each building has a program manager and a coaching specialist who conducts monthly observations. Gobbins says Early Learning Corps' approach is evidence-based and centered around high-impact tutoring, meaning the same tutor and students consistently have extended periods of time together. This can be one-on-one sessions or small groups of students. Depending on the tutoring placement, part-time, half-time, or full-time positions ranging from 15 to 32 hours a week are available. As Garew notes, during that time, tutors also help with the full classroom time as well, assisting teachers. She says, it's also nice for the children to see more adults that are interested in them, that want to be there and will talk with them. Then, when we pull them out to do the tutoring, they know us, they recognize us, and they see, oh, that's another adult that's interested in me, that wants to help me. I think that's a good thing at that age that they have. The more adults that are interested in them and trying to help them, the better off we are. The learning material is perfect for the younger students because it's short, says Garew. You know, you only have that maybe 10 to 15 minutes with those 3 to 4-year-old students before you need to change the activity and they need to do something else. The focus on very early learners is intentional, since impacts at that age are especially crucial and compounding for children. Gubbins says, 90% of a child's brain development happens before the age of 5. So that proves that those early years are critical. If Rochester students are not ready for kindergarten when they start school, that's just where the gap increases throughout. That's where we start to see third grade reading and math levels being lower than they should be. Since the Early Learning Corps is an AmeriCorps program, tutors are eligible for several benefits. These include a living stipend and an opportunity for a Siegel AmeriCorps Education Award upon completion, an award that can be used to pay off student loans or fund future education. Gubbins says, "My favorite part is the power of AmeriCorps. We're taking community members and we're training them in scripted interventions. They can make that meaningful impact on kindergarten readiness. It takes that approach of it takes a village. It's not just the school's responsibility. It embeds community members to provide that support to the youngest learners." A federal program, AmeriCorps, has been gutted by the Trump administration. In May 2025, program grants were cut by $400 million, with nearly 85% in staff layoffs. A lawsuit helped preserve $184 million of that figure. While Gubbins declined to comment on those changes, she says that Early Learning Corps is a national nonprofit and was able to navigate recent challenges effectively thanks to multiple other funding sources. The organization was launched in 2003 as Reading Corps Pre-K in Minnesota. Over the next 20 years, it grew into multiple programs across 12 other states, including New York. Poughkeepsie City School District was the first location in this state. Poughkeepsie School District began partnering with Early Learning Corps in 2023 as part of an effort to improve flagging numeracy and literacy skills among its youngest students. The organization says that it has supported 1,159 students, and 90% improved their literacy skills, while 88% grew in numeracy during the 24 to 25 school year. Weighted performances for Poughkeepsie elementary and middle school performance in English language arts, the youngest aged measures, show the district has always been within the level 1 proficiency range since the accountability measures started to be recorded in the 17 to 18 school year. Receiving a level 1 on an assessment means a student is performing well below grade level. In an interesting coincidence, Gubbins says the Poughkeepsie superintendent at the time, Eric Rosser, who is now superintendent for Rochester City School District, played a key role in bringing the program to the district. Gubbins says, "It's a very unique connection there. When I was starting to bring it to the city of Rochester, I didn't know that Dr. Rosser was going to be coming in as the superintendent. It was something that I didn't even know that he was pursuing. So it was a very organic implementation." Gubbins says the expansion to Rochester was also driven by the educational nonprofit Rock the Future Alliance. She credits a year and a half's worth of development with Executive Director Brian Lewis as clearing the way for Early Learning Corps to easily slot its learning services into the area. Sarah White-Smith, Director of Collective Impact for Rock the Future Alliance, says, "Rock the Future Alliance is proud to reaffirm our commitment to expanding Early Learning Corps in Rochester. The partnership strengthens our shared vision that every child in our community deserves access to high-quality early learning experiences that build a strong foundation for lifelong success. As in Poughkeepsie, Rochester City School District elementary and middle English language arts performances have also consistently been within the Level 1 category. There was a slight improvement in scores last year, however. Gubbins says, the ideal tutor is someone that really has the commitment and that want to do a service. Someone who wants to work with younger children and help with kindergarten readiness. When we have someone that's very compassionate about what they're doing, that will set them above and beyond. Giroux says, I would just encourage people to think about joining the team. It's fun. It's rewarding. I think the teachers appreciate it. I'm quite certain the kids do because they're usually very happy to go with you to do the tutoring once they realize that it's not work. We're playing a game and learning at the same time. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Jacob Schermerhorn, who's a Rochester Beacon contributing writer. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer David Raymond and is dated July 3rd. Rochester Community Players Social Media Shrew. For 29 years, the Rochester Community Players has provided local theatergoers with a summer highlight, a free outdoor Shakespeare production. This summer, it's one of the Bard's best-known plays, The Taming of the Shrew, which opens at Highland Park Bowl on July 9th and continues until July 25th. Shakespeare's comedy about the love-to-hate-you relationship between the unlikely couple of Petruchio and Katharina has been popular since the 1590s. Its many adaptations include a 1967 movie starring Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, Cole Porter's popular Broadway musical Kiss Me, Kate, and 10 Things I Hate About You, a 1999 high school rom-com spin on the story with Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles. Rochester Community Players first staged The Taming of the Shrew in 1964, and times have changed considerably since then. Changing social attitudes have raised new questions for its actors and directors. Why should an independent-minded, opinionated woman be called a shrew? And who says she needs taming? Director Jonathan Lowry says, I think this play's big problem is that it's 400 years old. Our society and culture have changed completely in regard to subjects like misogyny and domestic abuse, and this story looks very different in 2026. At its heart, The Taming of the Shrew was a play about seeking healthy and authentic relationships. By taking a more contemporary approach and making some judicious cuts, I think we're telling the story Shakespeare intended to tell. Katharina and Petruchio's story ends well, but they don't exactly meet cute. They hurl acid insults at each other and occasionally hurl each other from the get-go. The male lead, Petruchio, comes to the town of Padua specifically to wive it wealthily. Katharina's family is eager to get their fractious older daughter married off so their much more popular daughter, Bianca, can also marry. Petruchio's initial interest in Katharina is not in her personality, but her price tag. Michael Riches, who describes his character as a real huckster and unfathomably greedy, that's not who I am, he adds with a laugh, says Petruchio starts out assertive, self-centered, and obnoxious. But once Petruchio has been scammed into a real relationship with a woman, he realizes that he doesn't have everything. He learns to work together with someone to be happy in a relationship. One of Katharina's unsuccessful suitors calls her an irksome, brawling scold. But Kayla Perconti, who plays her, sees a much deeper character. She's a turbulent young woman full of angst and anxieties and resistant to the idea of being close to someone else. Rather than her being tamed, I think this play is about her finding someone who understands her. Katharina and Petruchio eventually realize through their interactions that they're like yin and yang. Each of them learns that they need somebody who can take it and dish it out. Lest this all sounds too serious, Lowry, a veteran of push physical theater, ensures that this production will still include plenty of the rowdy physical comedy for which The Taming of the Shrew is famous. In fact, to judge from a recent rehearsal, the cast almost never stops moving. There's another contemporary twist. Lowry sets this story in 2015, which he calls the dawn of the social media age. The characters are not only in the story, but constantly comment on it, taking cell phone photos and videos, texting, and posting to Instagram. Bianca is now a rising online social influencer and an it girl. Lowry says, there were many golden opportunities for using social media in 2015. No TikTok, however. It didn't start until 2016. But having a social media presence also led to massive social pressures. How can you create an online social image that's not inauthentic? The audience can get into the act too, viewing a live social media feed on their cell phones as characters in the play share asides, revealing their offstage thoughts and feelings, and even some of Petruchio and Katharina's wedding photos. Rochester Community Players presents Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew at 8 p.m. Thursday, July 9th through Saturday, July 25th at Highland Park Bowl, 1137 South Avenue. ASL Deaf Interpretation for the July 18th performance. Free admission, no shows on Monday or Tuesday nights. Any cancellations due to weather conditions will be posted on Facebook and at Rockcom Players. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from contributing writer David Raymond, and you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon is dated July 9th and comes from writer Will Cleveland. Rochester's Housing Gap. Rochester is in the midst of the biggest housing construction push in a generation. Yet, at the same time, many city residents, in particular renters, continue to struggle to pay for housing as costs have soared. The tension between these two facts is the real story of Rochester housing right now. Since 2022, the year Malik Evans took office as mayor, construction of more than 4,200 rental units has been started or completed in the city. The mayor said this in his 2026 State of the City address. Those units, more than 3,200 affordable and nearly 1,000 market rate, represent more than $2 billion in combined investment. More than half of the affordable units, Evans said, are priced for residents with extremely low and very low incomes, not just the 60% to 80% area median income band. that much of the city's assisted housing targets. The New York State Homes and Community Renewal Agency, which helps finance many of the affordable projects, separately counts more than 4,700 affordable homes built, renovated, or in the pipeline in Rochester over the same period, a rough match with the city's own figures. The tally spans the whole city, though downtown has captured a large share of the recent activity. None of it has been enough to bend the cost curve. Median rent in the city has climbed to $1,081, up roughly 40% from a decade ago. Median household income in the city has risen as well, from roughly $31,000 in 2011 to 2015 to about $47,000 in 2020 to 24. From Census Bureau estimates. This is a pace that appears to have kept up with or outstripped rising rents. Yet, more than half of Rochester's renters, who account for nearly 2/3 of all city residents, still spend more than they can afford on housing, even as construction has surged. In short, Rochester may be putting up new housing at a historic pace, but the city still hasn't put the affordability crunch behind it. A burst of building. The past year has brought a string of completions, 2 affordable housing developments, Taylor Square, the 134-unit, $84 million home leasing project in the historic Hickey Freeman building, and also Center City Courtyard, a 164-unit development occupying the full block bounded by Main, Plymouth, Broad, and Washington streets, also came online this year. Evans highlighted the latter in his State of the City address for injecting live, work, play vitality into a government-centric part of downtown that turned into a ghost town after 5 o'clock. On June 16th, completion of Park Square 2, where Conifer rehabbed 200 existing units and added 40 new builds in a $119 million project, was announced. Alta Vista, 76 units, Cobbs Hill Village, 104 units, and Parliament Fairfield, 110 units, round out the year's affordable housing completions. The largest project currently under instruction is the Andrews Terrace renovation at 125 St. Paul Street, a $330 million undertaking by Conifer Realty and Community Preservation Partners to provide 526 affordable units for seniors and disabled residents on Rochester's riverfront. True North Apartments, a 70-unit development from a collaboration of 5 faith-based organizations and DePaul Properties, opens this summer with 35 units dedicated to supportive housing and on-site services from DePaul, person-centered housing options, and a recovery and wellness clinic run by the Finger Lakes Area Counseling and Recovering Agency. 2 more projects have started since the city's last tally. Gateway Apartments, a $72.3 million conversion of a long vacant office building on East Main Street into 129 affordable income-restricted units. That began construction in May with New York State Homes and Community Renewal financing. And in the Northwest, Gardener's Lofts, the long-delayed redevelopment of the former Tent City complex at Lyle and Dewey Avenues, set back by a 5-alarm fire in 2025, is moving again as an 88-unit, roughly $72 million supportive housing project aimed largely at formerly homeless veterans. First Genesis Development Corporation's 22-unit project on Clifford Avenue, also underway, is income restricted and counts toward the affordable tally as well. By contrast, the former Riverside Hotel, with 161 units, leans market rate overall, with a smaller share of units affordable at 60% of median income. It's one of only a few projects in the current pipeline where market rate units make up the majority. A full breakdown, organized by affordable versus market rate, is at the end of this story. Carol Wheeler, the City of Rochester's manager of housing, says, "All of our projects are part of a bigger picture. Not doing projects in isolation, but having those projects build on other assets that are within the community. We're not just looking for projects that look nice, but we're looking to transform neighborhoods." Cost-burdened households. Increased housing supply is important, but it's only part of the affordability equation. Household income also matters. The Rochester Housing Development Fund Corporation says the Rochester metro area has a median family income of $107,000 for a family of 4, based on Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development calculations. A household is considered cost-burdened once it spends more than 30% of its income on housing. For a family at 60% of area median income, that's a ceiling of about $1,600 a month. At 30% of median income, closer to $800. ACT Rochester's tracking of U.S. Census Bureau data shows median monthly housing costs in the city, rent plus utilities, climbed from roughly $770 in 2015 to $1,081 in 2024, up 40% in 9 years, with the curve steepening after 2020. HUD estimates put fair market rent for a one-bedroom apartment at $1,050 in 2024, up from $775 in 2020, a 35% jump in 4 years. The cost of buying a home in the city has also increased sharply. Greater Rochester Association of Realtors statistics show that the median sale price in the city jumped from around $102,000 in 2018 to $148,000 in 2024, a 45% increase. At the close of the second quarter of 2026, the median sale price was $181,000. According to Census Bureau data, more than half, 50.9%, of Rochester renters in 2024 were cost-burdened. Here are some of the affordable, supportive, income-restricted projects completed in the last year. There's Taylor Square at 1155 North Clinton, Center City Courtyard at 125 West Main, Alta Vista at 101 Franklin Street, Harper's Corner at East Main and North Clinton, Cobbs Hill Village at 645 Norris Drive, Parliament Fairfield on St. Paul Street, Park Square 2 at 475 East Broad, and By the Block, Phase 1, 24 single-family homes in the northeast quadrant. The article also lists 6 projects currently underway in that category. The home ownership pipeline lists By the Block, Phase 2, Rochester Roots, and Hinge Homes as in the pipeline for home ownership. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Will Cleveland, who's a Rochester Beacon contributing writer. He's a former Democrat and Chronicle reporter, and he writes about beer in the Finger Lakes region and Western New York on Substack. And you've been listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. My name is Jan Heineman. Thanks for listening today, and please come again and listen again in the future.